Good morning. Happy Thursday. I want to thank everybody who pointed out that the jury in Earl's trial is currently at 6 not guilty to 6 guilty instead of the 7 not guilty to 5 not guilty that I said in my video last night. That completely invalidates everything I said in that video, so you could just completely ignore that video and just pretend it never existed. I'm just going to have to delete that video because I am so ashamed that I picked 7 to 5 instead of 6 to 6. That makes me a terrible person. I must have been operating on antiquated data, and it's inexcusable. Now that everybody is fully informed that last night the jury was 6 to 6 and not 7 to 5, your biases are definitely confirmed, and don't even question your biases anymore. But for those of you who aren't idiots, I also want to point out that I'm not suggesting that you should give up your biases. You have your biases for a reason. You have your that the first impressions count kind of thing. Your first impression of someone, I generally tend to trust my first impressions. People are what you first think they are, generally speaking. Sometimes people can pull the wool over your eyes, but there's the human mind is excellent for picking up on subtle cues that we consciously aren't aware of, because we map shortcuts. This happened, so this. And it's probably not perfectly logical. It's definitely not perfectly logical, but it's a good enough system that, generally speaking, if you get a bad feeling about someone, trust it. If you get a good feeling about someone, trust but verify. People are terrible. People are terrible. Anyway, so I'm not suggesting that you give up on your biases, but I am suggesting that you should be aware of your biases, because you can be wrong, and you're as smart as you are, and I'm always impressed that my audience is entirely made up of geniuses and doctors and lawyers and psychologists and psychics. You would be amazed at the number of psychics I have in my comment section who tell me the future. It is awesome. I love my audience, and I would never say anything negative about my audience, because they're all just such amazing and smart people, brilliant people. Geniuses. The top 1% of the top 1% watch my videos, and no one who has even one iota of intelligence below the average would ever dream of even clicking on my videos. So all of your comments are inspired. They're pure gold. I wouldn't give up any one of them, and each and every one of you is absolutely right every time. So I'm not asking you to give up your biases. I'm just asking you to be aware of your biases. If you're aware of your biases, then you're aware you can be wrong. If you're aware of your biases, it's not as big of a shock because I strongly suspect Earl's going to get found not guilty. If it does not go to a hung jury today, my money is on not guilty. You don't get this far into it and get a guilty verdict. The 6 guilty people are going to be much more likely swayed to, well, maybe it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, because the other 6 people are saying it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And remember, that's the standard. It's not a choice between guilt or innocence. Has the state proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? Beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of things can bring up a reasonable doubt, because, it has been 25, 30 years. It's been a long time. Like, it was mid-90s, and we're 22 right now, almost 23. And that's been a long time. And that might raise a doubt. There's family members apparently testified on Earl's behalf that he didn't do these things. So the jury gets to it, and we get reports from people who are biased against Earl, saying that Earl's witnesses weren't credible, but they're biased, and they don't have to necessarily be 100% credible. The jurors can just maybe when they're weighing this person's testimony versus this person's testimony, give slightly more weight to the not guilty, or might just say that, you know what, it gives me a reasonable doubt. It just gives me a reasonable doubt. I still believe the victim, the alleged victim, I guess, technically. But this other testimony gives me a reasonable doubt. That's all I need. So just be prepared for it and understand your biases and, be willing to say I was wrong. And yes, I understand that if Earl is found not guilty, it doesn't mean he's found innocent. Yes, I understand. I understand that entirely. It's not a perfect system. But at some point, you probably ought to let it go. You probably ought to let it go. And think of the nature of the people who are pushing so hard on this. Think of the nature of the people who are pushing so hard that Earl is guilty. And contrast them to people who are saying that Earl is innocent. Like people like, oh, would Jack let Earl watch his children? No, Jack said he wouldn't do that. Like, Jack's not completely stupid. Jack's not the smartest boy in the world, but he's not a complete retard. He understands the nature of people. He's not going to jeopardize kids or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that he thinks that Earl is guilty. I mean, I wouldn't let a rapist hang out with my kids, period, even if the rapist wasn't attracted to underage kids. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who haven't been convicted of any crimes that I would not let around my kids. I mean, it's a silly statement. But then you look at the people who are like pushing so hard that Earl is definitely guilty. You've got crayon eating Dougie, who's, I mean, I don't even know if I need to say more. I mean, the guy is miles away from normal. He is way out there. The way he interacts with people, like in my comment sections, the way he interacts, the way he interacted when he was confronted in the court house by Selena and Earl, just get away from me, deputy, they're harassing me, just because they walked up to him. Jack was standing outside smoking a cigarette, and Dougie was going to walk outside, and he sees him. He goes and runs to one of the constables, saying, "Oh, he's harassing me." When Jack is literally standing outside just doing a live stream. I mean, the guy's fucking whacked, and he's one of the ones who's pushing so hard. Then you got Teresa. Teresa's dirty little story is she went auditing with Earl. He's from Texas. She's from Louisiana. She complains that he bought her cheap tires for her Prius, but he bought her tires for her Prius, and they drove out to Washington, D.C. to audit Washington, D.C. together. Road trip. Just the two of them. Nothing happened. He totally wasn't banging her. And now all of a sudden, like, she's just, Earl's the worst person ever. Rah! Just knives out. And admittedly, he's a douche to her too. But, I mean, you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that. I'm not saying that they did anything, but there's people pushing stories here. And who knows what the motivations of the daughters are. If they're not telling the truth, who knows what their motivations are. If they are telling the truth, then why weren't they pushing on this earlier? It's a question. I'm not saying they had to. I'm not saying that means that it didn't happen. I'm just asking questions, Reasonable doubt's a bit of a bitch. It's a bit of a bitch. And motivations of people are also a bit of a bitch. So bear it in mind, bear it in mind. There's a lot of drama in history around this whole thing. And there's a lot of people who work themselves around in tiny little loops over the evidence or lack thereof. And there's also people who say, I'm just going to believe the victim no matter what. I'm going to believe the victim no matter what. Doesn't matter. And that's fine. You can do that. That's fine. But don't be surprised if it comes back not guilty. That's all I'm saying. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if it goes to a hung jury and the state decides not to pursue it anymore. That's a very real possibility. I mean, if the state did its best, I mean, I don't know of any like real error. No one has reported on any real error that was committed. So I can't say that there was any real error committed. and no, they can't just bring in like Earl's a bad person, ergo he molested his daughter. They can't do that. So I don't know that there was any error committed. I don't know that there was anything that the state should have brought forward but didn't, or that the trial court ruled to exclude, that the court should have ruled to include. But there's a very real possibility, if it's a hung jury, that the prosecution's going to be like, we tried. I guess we just don't have a good enough case. And especially if it hangs on 6-6. I mean, if it hung on 11-1, 11 guilty, 1 not guilty, then I could see the state might be a little more motivated to try to get another shot at it. But 6-6. Why would the state go down that road? And if it gets worse from there, I mean, the more jurors that are saying not guilty, the less likely the state is going to pursue it. But anyway, we ought to have some answers today. I hope we have some answers today so we can put this to bed and get on to the next cycle of drama. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.